When Roberto Santoro stepped into the abandoned mansion, he expected to find only dust and forgotten luxury. Instead, he found Elisa, a woman the world believed dead for years. Who kept her there, and why? Before we dive into the story, comment below where in the world you're watching from today. The sun was setting behind the towering cedar trees as Roberto Santoro's black luxury car pulled up to the abandoned mansion. At 45, Roberto had become one of the wealthiest property developers in the country, known for his golden touch in transforming forgotten estates into modern masterpieces. "So this is Val dos Cedros," he said, stepping out of the car and adjusting his expensive suit. "It looks worse than in the photos." His assistant Marcus hurried to his side with a folder of documents. "The property has been abandoned for almost 5 years, sir. The previous owners went bankrupt and left everything behind." Roberto smiled confidently. "That's what makes it perfect. We'll tear down most of it and build the most exclusive gated community this town has ever seen." As they approached the massive wooden front doors, Roberto felt a strange sensation. Something about this place felt different from all his other projects. He shook the feeling away. Business was business, and sentimentality had no place in success. "I'll take it from here," Roberto told Marcus. "Get the car serviced while I look around. I'll call when I'm done." "Alone, sir. The electricity hasn't been reconnected yet, and it will be dark soon." Roberto laughed. "I didn't build my empire by being afraid of the dark, Marcus. Go." Once alone, Roberto pushed open the heavy doors. They creaked loudly, breaking the eerie silence. Inside, the mansion was a mix of faded grandeur and neglect. Dust-covered furniture, cobwebs in corners, and peeling wallpaper told the story of its abandonment. He walked through the main hall, his footsteps echoing on the marble floor. Despite the dirt and damage, he could see that Val dos Cedros had once been magnificent. High ceilings with intricate designs, crystal chandeliers now dulled with dust, and wide staircases leading to upper floors. "This place must have been something special," he muttered to himself. Roberto started taking photos with his phone, planning which walls would come down first. He moved from room to room, mentally calculating costs and profits. The kitchen was outdated but spacious. The dining room could host 30 people easily. Every room confirmed what he already knew. This was a goldmine waiting to be exploited. As daylight faded, Roberto switched on his phone's flashlight. He still wanted to check the upper floors before leaving. The grand staircase seemed solid enough, though it creaked under his weight. The second floor had numerous bedrooms, each with its own bathroom, perfect for the luxury apartments he planned. He was about to head back downstairs when he heard something that made him freeze, a sound. At first he thought it might be the wind or an animal that had found its way inside, but then he heard it again, a soft whimper, almost like a cry, coming from the end of the hallway. "Is someone there?" he called out, his voice bouncing off the walls. No answer came, but he was certain he'd heard something. Against his better judgment, Roberto followed the sound, his flashlight cutting through the darkness ahead. At the end of the hallway was a door, slightly ajar. He pushed it open slowly and swept his light across what appeared to be a master bedroom. The large bed was still there, stripped of linens. A vanity table stood against one wall, its mirror cracked. Then his light caught movement in the corner. Roberto turned quickly. There, huddled beside an old dresser, was a woman. Her long hair was tangled and dirty, falling over her thin shoulders. She wore what looked like a once elegant nightgown, now torn and soiled. Her eyes, wide with fear, reflected the light of his phone. Roberto stepped back in shock. "Who are you? What are you doing here?" The woman raised a trembling hand to shield her eyes from the bright light. "Please," she whispered, her voice hoarse as if from disuse. "Please don't hurt me." Roberto lowered his phone slightly. "I'm not going to hurt you, but you're trespassing on private property. This house is abandoned." "No," she said, shaking her head frantically. "This is my home. He told me to stay here, said he would come back." Roberto moved closer, cautiously. Now he could see that the woman was not just dirty but malnourished. Her face, though gaunt, had a certain delicate beauty to it. Her wrists were thin, almost fragile looking. "Who told you to stay here? When?" She seemed confused by the question, looking around as if for an answer. Carlos, my husband, he said I needed to stay hidden, that people wanted to hurt me. Roberto knelt down to her level, keeping some distance. What's your name? Elisa, she replied softly. Elisa Montero. Elisa, how long have you been here? She looked down at her hands. I don't know anymore. The days, they all blend together. Roberto's mind raced. Was this woman mentally ill, a squatter, or was there truth to her story? Either way, she clearly needed help. When did you last eat? He asked. Yesterday, I think. There's still some. Canned food in the pantry. Roberto stood up, making a decision. Stay here, I'll be right back. He hurried downstairs to his car where he kept some bottled water and energy bars for long work days. When he returned, Elisa was exactly where he'd left her, watching him warily. Here, he said, offering the water and food. It's not much, but it should help. She took them carefully, as if afraid they might be snatched away. Roberto watched as she drank the water desperately, then slowly ate the energy bar. Elisa, I need to know what happened. Why are you living here like this? Between small bites, her story began to emerge. Carlos Montero had been a wealthy businessman who married Elisa 5 years ago. At first, everything had been perfect, but Carlos became increasingly paranoid and controlling. He started telling Elisa that people were plotting against them, that she wasn't safe outside the house. He moved us here, away from everyone, said it was temporary, she explained. Then one day he told me I needed to stay hidden upstairs. He boarded up the windows, brought me supplies, said he had to go away for a while to fix things. And he never came back? Roberto asked, already guessing the answer. Elisa shook her head. At first I waited patiently. Then the food started running low. I've been surviving on what was left in the kitchen, afraid to leave because Carlos said people would hurt me if they found me. Roberto felt a mixture of horror and disbelief. Elisa, this property was foreclosed on. The bank took it because the mortgage wasn't being paid. Carlos abandoned this place and you. Her eyes filled with tears. No, you're wrong. He wouldn't do that. He loves me. When did you last see him? Elisa struggled to answer. I don't know. The seasons have changed several times. Years, Elisa, it's been years, Roberto said gently. You've been living here alone all this time? She nodded slowly, the reality of her situation seeming to sink in. Roberto pulled out his phone to call. The police. But Elisa lunged forward with surprising strength, grabbing his arm. No, please don't call anyone. They'll take me away. You need help, Elisa. Medical attention. Food. Please, she begged, tears streaming down her face. I have nowhere to go, no one left. Carlos made sure of that. He cut me off from everyone and my family, my friends. I don't even know if they're looking for me anymore. Roberto stared at her, conflicted. The sensible thing would be to call authorities immediately. But something about Elisa's desperation touched him in a way he hadn't felt in years. What if... He started, hardly believing what he was about to suggest. What if you come with me tonight, just to get cleaned up, have a proper meal? Then tomorrow we can figure out what to do next. Hope flickered across Elisa's face, quickly replaced by suspicion. Why would you help me? You don't even know me. It was a fair question. Roberto had built his reputation on being ruthlessly pragmatic in business. He didn't do charity. He didn't get involved in messy situations. And yet, because no one deserves to live like this, he answered simply. After some gentle persuasion, Elisa agreed to leave with him. Roberto helped her stand, noticing how she swayed slightly on her feet. He supported her as they slowly made their way downstairs and out to his car. Marcus was shocked when Roberto opened the car door, revealing the disheveled woman. Sir, who is... Change of plans, Roberto cut him off. We're taking her to my house. And Marcus, not a word about this to anyone. Understand? At Roberto's luxurious penthouse, Elisa stood frozen in the entryway, overwhelmed by the modern splendor after years in the decaying mansion. The guest bathroom is this way, Roberto guided her. There are clean towels, soap. Everything you need. I'll find you some clothes. Left alone in the bathroom, Elisa stared at her reflection in the mirror. The person looking back was almost unrecognizable: hollow cheeks, dull eyes, dirty skin. As she stepped into the warm shower, years of grime washed away along with her tears. Meanwhile, Roberto called his private doctor, Dr. Phillips, an old friend who could be trusted to be discreet. "I need you to come to my penthouse immediately," Roberto said. "And bring your medical bag. It's an emergency, but not one for hospitals." "Roberto, if someone's injured..." "It's complicated, Jack. I'll explain when you get here. Please, I need your help." While waiting, Roberto instructed his housekeeper to prepare food and find clothes that might fit Elisa. His mind was racing, trying to make sense of his own actions. Why had he brought this stranger into his home? What was he going to do with her? These questions had no logical answers, only the undeniable pull he felt to help her. When Elisa emerged from the bathroom, wrapped in a plush bathrobe, her transformation was already visible. Without the layer of dirt, her skin was pale but beautiful. Her wet hair, now clean, was a rich brown that fell past her shoulders. Despite her thinness, there was a natural grace to her movements. "Feel better?" Roberto asked. Elisa nodded, looking around nervously. "I don't understand why you're doing this." Before he could answer, Dr. Phillips arrived. After a brief explanation, the doctor examined Elisa while Roberto waited in the living room, staring out at the city lights. "She's suffering from malnutrition and mild dehydration," Dr. Phillips reported afterward. "There are no signs of physical abuse, but psychologically, that's another matter. She's been isolated for so long that reintegration will be challenging. Roberto, what exactly are you planning to do?" "I don't know yet," he admitted, "but I couldn't just leave her there." Dr. Phillips studied his friend curiously. "This isn't like you getting personally involved?" "I know. She needs professional help, counseling, and there are legal considerations. If her husband really abandoned her..." "I'll handle it," Roberto interrupted. "Just tell me what she needs medically." For now. After the doctor left, Roberto found Elisa in the kitchen, dressed in the simple clothes his housekeeper had provided. She was eating slowly, savoring each bite of the soup as if it might be her last meal. "Dr. Phillips says you're going to be fine," Roberto told her. "You just need proper nutrition and rest." Elisa set down her spoon. "Why are you doing all this for me?" Roberto sat across from her. "Honestly, I'm not sure. Maybe because when I saw you there, I realized that for all my success, I've never actually saved anyone before." "What happens tomorrow?" she asked, fear creeping back into her voice. "Whatever you want," he replied. "I can help you find your family, or..." "No," she said firmly. "There's no one." Carlos made sure of that. He told everyone I was unstable. Dangerous even. No one would believe me over him. "Then we'll figure something else out," Roberto assured her. "For tonight, just rest. You're safe here." That night, as Elisa slept in his guest room, Roberto sat in his office searching for information about Carlos Montero. What he found disturbed him deeply. Carlos had indeed been a successful businessman, but there were rumors of shady dealings and connections to organized crime. More importantly, there was a missing persons report filed 4 years ago for Elisa Montero by her sister. According to the report, Carlos had claimed Elisa ran away after a mental breakdown. The case had gone cold when Carlos himself disappeared. 2 years later, presumably fleeing from debts and legal troubles, Roberto leaned back in his chair, processing this information. The woman sleeping in his guest room had been written off as either dead or mentally unstable. The world had forgotten about Elisa Montero, but now he had found her. And for reasons he couldn't yet understand, Roberto felt responsible for her. Not just for her immediate safety, but for helping her rebuild the life that had been stolen from her. As dawn broke over the city, Roberto made a decision that would change both their lives forever. Vale dos Cedros would no longer be demolished. Instead, it would become a symbol of restoration, both for the mansion itself and for the woman who had survived within its walls. What Roberto didn't realize was that by saving Elisa, he was setting in motion events that would uncover dangerous secrets, powerful enemies, and a connection between them that neither could have imagined. A week had passed since Roberto brought Elisa to his penthouse. The transformation in her was remarkable. With proper nutrition and rest, color had returned to her cheeks. Her eyes, once dull with fear, now sparkled with new life. The borrowed clothes had been replaced with simple but elegant outfits that Roberto had arranged to be delivered. Each morning, Roberto found himself looking forward to breakfast with Elisa. Her gentle presence was a stark contrast to the cutthroat business world he inhabited. "You seem better today," Roberto commented as they sat on his balcony overlooking the city. The morning sun cast a golden glow over Elisa's face. "I feel like I'm waking up from a long nightmare," she replied, sipping her coffee. "But I can't stay here forever, Roberto. I need to figure out what to do with my life." Roberto set down his cup. "Actually, I've been thinking about that. I found your sister, Victoria. She filed a missing persons report for you 4 years ago." Elisa's eyes widened. "Vicky? She looked for me. Carlos told me she wanted nothing to do with me anymore. He lied," Roberto said gently. "She never stopped looking. I haven't contacted her yet. I thought you should decide when you're ready." Tears welled in Elisa's eyes. "I don't know if I can face her yet. Carlos told everyone I had mental problems. What if she doesn't believe what really happened?" "We'll make her understand," Roberto assured her. "But there's something else we need to discuss. I've decided not to demolish Vale dos Cedros." "What? Why?" "Because that house, despite what happened to you there, has history and value. I'm going to restore it instead." He paused, watching her reaction carefully. "And I want you to help me." Elisa stared at him in disbelief. "Me? I don't know anything about restoration. But you lived there. You know that house in a way no one else does." Roberto leaned forward. "I think working on this project might help you reclaim some of what was taken from you. And..." He hesitated. "It would give you purpose while you figure out your next steps." Before Elisa could respond, Roberto's phone rang. The call display showed Diana Martinez, his fiancée. With an apologetic look to Elisa, he answered and stepped inside. "Diana, I was going to call you today." "Were you?" Diana's voice was sharp. "It's been a week since we spoke, Roberto. I've been trying to reach you about the charity gala. Everyone's asking why you haven't confirmed yet." "I've been busy with a new project," he explained vaguely. "Too busy for your fiancé." "My father is asking questions, Roberto. The merger depends on our families coming together." Roberto sighed. His engagement to Diana, daughter of his biggest competitor, had been as much a business arrangement as a romantic one. "I'll be there, Diana. I promise." When he returned to the balcony, Elisa was staring out at the city. "I didn't know you were engaged," she said quietly. "It's complicated," Roberto admitted. "Diana and I have known each other for years. Our families have business interests together." Elisa nodded, understanding the unspoken. "She must be wondering where you've been all week. I'll tell her everything soon. But first, I need to know if you'll help me with Vale dos Cedros." After a moment of consideration, Elisa agreed. "I think you're right. Maybe helping to restore the mansion will help restore me too." Later that day, Roberto took Elisa to his office. At Santoro Developments, he introduced her as a consultant for the Vale dos Cedros project, drawing curious looks from his employees. His assistant, Marcus, was particularly skeptical. "Sir, may I speak with you privately?" Marcus asked after showing Elisa to Roberto's office. In the hallway, Marcus expressed his concerns. "With all due respect, sir, who is this woman really? You found her squatting in an abandoned property, and now she's consulting on our biggest project? She has unique insights into the property, Marcus, and my personal life is not your concern. It is when it affects the company. The board is already questioning your decision to restore rather than develop, and Diana Martinez has called 3 times this morning." Roberto fixed his assistant with a stern look. "I know what I'm doing, Marcus. Now please arrange for the architects to meet us at Vale dos Cedros tomorrow morning." Back in his office, Roberto found Elisa examining the architectural plans spread across his desk. "Your assistant doesn't trust me," she observed. "Marcus is protective of the company and me." Roberto stood beside her, looking at the plans. "What do you think? It's strange seeing the house like this, just lines on paper." She traced the outline of the master bedroom where Roberto had found her. So much happened there. We don't have to include that room in the restoration if it brings back bad memories. Elisa shook her head. No, I want to face everything. No more hiding. Their conversation was interrupted when the office door swung open. Diana Martinez strode in, dressed impeccably in a designer suit, her dark hair pulled back in a severe bun. She stopped short at the sight of Elisa. I see you really have been busy, Diana said coldly. Her eyes swept over Elisa, taking in her simple clothes and natural beauty. Diana, Roberto moved forward. This is Elisa Montero, a consultant for the Vale dos Cedros project. Elisa, this is Diana Martinez, my fiancée. Elisa extended her hand politely. It's nice to meet you, Ms. Martinez. Diana ignored the offered hand. Roberto, we need to talk privately. It's okay, Elisa said quickly. I'll wait outside. Once they were alone, Diana rounded on Roberto. Who is she really? And don't tell me she's just a consultant. I haven't seen you for a week and suddenly there's this woman in your office. Roberto explained the situation as simply as possible, omitting the fact that Elisa was staying at his penthouse. She survived a terrible ordeal, Diana. I'm trying to help her rebuild her life. Since when do you run a charity for strays? Diana asked skeptically. This isn't like you, Roberto. You've never taken a personal interest in anyone or anything. That wasn't directly profitable. Her words stung because they contained truth. Roberto had built his reputation on being ruthlessly pragmatic. People can change, he said simply. Diana studied him for a moment. You like her. I respect what she's been through. That's not what I mean, and you know it. Diana stepped closer. Remember what's at stake here, Roberto. Our engagement isn't just about us. It's about merging two empires. If you jeopardize that for some woman you found in an abandoned house, don't threaten me, Diana, Roberto said quietly. I've never responded well to threats. Their conversation was interrupted by Roberto's phone. It was Dr. Phillips. Jack, what is it? I did some digging, as you asked, the doctor said. Carlos Montero isn't just missing. He's dead, Roberto. His body was found in a river 2 years ago. The police ruled it a mob hit because of his gambling debts. Roberto felt a chill run down his spine. Does anyone know about Elisa? That's the strange part. According to official records, Elisa Montero also died, supposedly in a car accident 3 years ago. Someone went to a lot of trouble to erase her existence. After ending the call, Roberto sat heavily in his chair, processing this information. Elisa was legally dead. Carlos had not just abandoned her, he had erased her from the world before his own demise. Diana noticed his troubled expression. What is it? Nothing that concerns you, he replied. I need to speak with Elisa. Diana blocked his path. Don't dismiss me, Roberto. Whatever you're involved in, it affects me too. If this woman is bringing trouble, the only trouble here is your inability to trust me, Roberto interrupted. Go to the gala tonight, Diana. Make my excuses. I have more important matters to attend to. The hurt in Diana's eyes was quickly replaced by cold anger. You're making a mistake. My father won't take this insult lightly. After Diana left, Roberto found Elisa waiting anxiously in the reception area. I'm sorry about that, he said, guiding her toward the elevator. We need to talk, but not here. In the car, Roberto explained what Dr. Phillips had discovered. Elisa listened in stunned silence. I'm dead, she finally whispered. Carlos declared me dead? It explains why no one came looking for you at the mansion. Legally, you don't exist anymore. Tears filled Elisa's eyes. All those years waiting, hoping someone would find me, and everyone thought I was already gone. Roberto reached over and took her hand. Your sister didn't believe it. That's why she filed the missing persons report even after the supposed accident. When they returned to the penthouse, Roberto poured them both a drink. There's something else, he said carefully. Carlos is dead too. He was killed 2 years ago, apparently over gambling debts. Elisa sat perfectly still, absorbing this news. I should feel something, she said after a long silence. Relief, maybe, or grief, but I just feel empty. It's shock, Roberto said gently. You've had too many revelations in one day. Elisa looked up at him. What happens now if I'm legally dead? How do I reclaim my life? We fight, Roberto said simply. I have lawyers, resources. We'll get your identity back. Why? Elisa asked, her voice breaking. Why are you doing all this for me? You're risking your relationship, your business connections. Roberto sat beside her on the couch. When I found you in that mansion, something changed in me. For years, I've measured success in dollars and deals. I've torn down the old to build the new without a second thought. But seeing you there, surviving, against all odds, it made me question everything. He took her hands in his. Helping you isn't charity, Elisa. It's redemption. For both of us. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the world around them seemed to fade away. Slowly, Roberto leaned forward. Their lips were inches apart when his phone rang again. It was Marcus, his voice urgent. Sir, there's a problem. Someone broke into your office after you left. They went through all the Vale dos Cedros files. Roberto felt a chill run down his spine. Did security catch them? No, they disabled the cameras. Sir, I think you should know. Ms. Martinez was seen entering the building again after you left. Roberto ended the call, his mind racing. Someone broke into my office, he told. Elisa, they were looking for information about Vale dos Cedros. You think it was Diana? I don't know, but I think we need to visit the mansion tomorrow. If someone's interested in those files, we need to know why. The next morning, Roberto and Elisa drove to Vale dos Cedros. The mansion looked different. In daylight, less ominous but no less imposing. For Elisa, returning was visibly difficult. She trembled slightly as they approached the front doors. We don't have to do this, Roberto said. I can come back alone. No, Elisa said firmly. I need to face this place on my terms. Inside, they moved through the dusty rooms together. Elisa pointed out details about the house's original features, things only someone who had lived there would notice. The library was my favorite room, she said, leading Roberto to a space with empty bookshelves and a large fireplace. Carlos kept it locked most of the time, but I found the key once. There were so many books. As she ran her hand along the mantelpiece, something clicked. A small panel beside the fireplace slid open, revealing a hidden compartment. I never knew about this, Elisa whispered. Inside was a small metal box. Roberto pulled it out and opened. It contained passports, cash in various currencies, and a flash drive. Carlos's escape plan, Roberto surmised. He must have hidden it here before things went bad for him. Elisa picked up one of the passports. It had her photo, but a different name. He was planning to take me with him, she said softly, but instead, he left me behind. Roberto examined the flash drive. Whatever is on this might explain why someone broke into my office. They might be looking for this. Before they could discuss it further, they heard a car pull up outside. Through the window, they saw a black SUV. Two men in suits got out, their stance and alertness suggesting they weren't casual visitors. We need to leave, Roberto said urgently. Now. They slipped out through the kitchen door as the men entered. Through the front, Roberto's car was parked around the side, partially hidden by overgrown shrubs. As they drove away, Elisa clutched the metal box. Who were those men? I don't know, Roberto admitted. But I think we need to find out what's on this flash drive. Back at the penthouse, Roberto inserted the flash drive into his laptop. It contained financial records, offshore account numbers, and photographs, evidence of money laundering operations involving several prominent business figures. Carlos was blackmailing them, Roberto realized. That's why he was killed. Among the photographs was one that made Roberto freeze. It showed Carlos shaking hands with Antonio Martinez, Diana's father. Your fiancé's family was involved with Carlos? Elisa asked, peering over his shoulder. It appears so. And if Diana found out you were alive and might have access to this information, the implications hung in the air between them. Elisa sat down heavily. I've brought danger into your life. Roberto closed the laptop. No, I chose this when I decided to help you. But now we need to be careful, very careful. That evening, as they discussed their next steps, the doorbell rang. Roberto checked the security monitor and saw Diana standing there alone. I need to talk to her, he told Elisa. Stay in the guest room. When Roberto opened the door, Diana pushed past him into the apartment. Where is she? Diana demanded. This is my home, Diana. You don't get to barge in here making demands. Diana turned to face him, her expression a mix of anger and fear. My father received a very interesting call today from a detective who used to work Carlos Montero's case. Apparently, Carlos's widow might still be alive. Imagine his surprise, since everyone thought she died years ago. Roberto kept his face neutral. And what does this have to do with me? Don't play dumb, Roberto. You found her at Vale dos Cedros, didn't you? You have no idea what you've gotten yourself involved in. Then enlighten me, Roberto challenged. What exactly is your father afraid Elisa might know? Diana's eyes widened slightly at his direct approach. So you admit she's here? I didn't say that. But I am curious why the Martinez family is so interested in a woman who supposedly died 3 years ago. Diana stepped closer, lowering her voice. Roberto, listen to me carefully. If Carlos Montero's widow has evidence from his dealings, people will kill to get it back, including my father's associates. I came here to warn you. Warn me or threaten me? Both, Diana admitted. I still care about you, despite everything. Walk away from this, Roberto. Give up the Vale dos Cedros project. Send the woman away, wherever she is. And if I don't, Diana sighed, then our engagement is over along with the merger, and that will be the least of your problems. After Diana left, Roberto found Elisa in the guest room, having heard everything through the door. She's right, Elisa said, her voice trembling. I should leave. I never meant to ruin your life. Roberto sat beside her on the bed. You haven't ruined anything. In fact, you might have saved me from a very cold marriage and a business partnership with criminals. He gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. I'm not walking away, Elisa. Not from Vale dos Cedros, and certainly not from you. What do we do now? She asked. We use what Carlos left behind. The evidence on that flash drive is our protection. And tomorrow we're going to contact your sister. It's time for Elisa Montero to come back to life. As night fell over the city, Roberto and Elisa sat side by side on the balcony, the lights below mirroring the stars above. The danger hadn't passed. It was just beginning. But for the first time in years, neither of them felt alone. Unknown. To them across town, Diana Martinez sat in her father's study, watching him rage. You failed, Antonio Martinez growled. Roberto still has the woman and probably the evidence too. I tried to reason with him, Diana defended herself. But he's changed. She's changed him. Antonio slammed his fist on the desk. Then we're done. Being reasonable. Call Vega. Tell him to find the woman and the flash drive. Tell him to use whatever means necessary. Diana hesitated, suddenly afraid of what she had set in motion. What about Roberto? Her father's eyes were cold. Collateral damage, my dear. In business, sometimes sacrifices must be made. As Diana left the study, a tear slid down her cheek. She had wanted to save Roberto from Elisa, but now she might have condemned them both. The morning sun streamed through the windows of Roberto's penthouse as he finished a phone call. Elisa sat across from him at the breakfast table, nervously twisting a napkin in her hands. Is everything arranged? She asked when he set down his phone. Roberto nodded. We're meeting your sister Victoria at the cafe in 2 hours. I spoke with her myself. She was emotional. She never believed you were dead. Elisa's eyes filled with tears. I've dreamed of this moment for so long, but now I'm terrified. What if she doesn't recognize me? What if she blames me for disappearing? Roberto reached across the table and took her hand. She loves you, Elisa. That was clear from our conversation. She's been searching for you for years. Thank you, Elisa whispered. For everything. I don't know how I'll ever repay you. Seeing you reclaim your life is payment enough, Roberto said, his voice soft. The growing feelings between them remained unspoken, but hung in the air like a delicate perfume. Their moment was interrupted by Roberto's phone ringing again. It was Marcus. Sir, there's something you should know, his assistant said urgently. 2 men came to the office asking questions about Elisa Montero. They claimed to be police detectives, but their badges looked suspicious. Security kept them in the lobby, but they were Persistent. Roberto felt his stomach tighten. Did they leave a card or names? They said they were detectives Vega and Santos. I ran a check. There are no detectives by those names in the department. After ending the call, Roberto shared the news with Elisa. Antonio Martinez is making his move, he concluded. We need to be careful. Maybe we should cancel meeting Victoria, Elisa suggested, fear evident in her voice. No, Roberto said firmly. That's exactly what they want, to isolate you again. But we'll take precautions. Roberto made several more calls, arranging for a private security team. Then he retrieved the flash drive from his safe. I've made copies of everything, he explained, handing Elisa a sealed envelope. If anything happens to me, take this to this address. He wrote down the name and location of his most trusted lawyer. Don't talk like that, Elisa said, her voice trembling. Nothing is going to happen to you. Roberto smiled grimly. I'm just being cautious. The Martinez family is powerful, but they're not above the law. This evidence could destroy them, and they know it. 2 hours later, Roberto and Elisa sat in a corner booth of a quiet cafe, accompanied by 2 plainclothes security guards positioned nearby. Every time the door opened, Elisa tensed. Then a woman entered who made Elisa gasp. Victoria Montero had the same delicate features as her sister, though her hair was shorter and streaked with premature gray. She scanned the cafe anxiously. Vicky, Elisa whispered, standing up on shaky legs. Victoria turned, and time seemed to stop. The sisters stared at each other across the room, both frozen in disbelief. Then Victoria rushed forward, nearly knocking over a waiter in her haste. Elisa, is it really you? Her voice broke as she reached out to touch her sister's face. They told me you were dead. I never believed it. But after so long, the sisters embraced, both sobbing openly. Roberto stepped back, giving them space for their reunion. He watched as they held each other, years of grief and longing pouring out in a flood of tears and broken words. When they finally sat down, Victoria couldn't stop staring at Elisa. What happened to you? Where have you been all these years? Slowly, painfully, Elisa told her story, how Carlos had isolated her, how he had left her in the mansion, and how Roberto had found her. Victoria listened in horror, her hand covering her mouth. I knew Carlos was controlling, but this is monstrous, Victoria said when Elisa finished. I tried to report you missing, but the police said Carlos had evidence you'd had a mental breakdown. Then when they found a body they identified as yours. Her voice trailed off. How did they identify the body? Roberto asked, leaning forward. Victoria shook her head. Dental records, supposedly. I demanded to see the body, but they said it was too damaged. I never believed it was you, Elisa. I kept searching, but every lead went nowhere. As they talked, Roberto noticed a black SUV park across the street, the same one they had seen at Vale dos Cedros. We need to leave, he said, abruptly, signaling to his security team. Now, Victoria looked confused. What's wrong? I'll explain later, Elisa promised, following Roberto's lead. Come with us, Vicky, please. They exited through the kitchen, Roberto leading the way with one security guard, while the other followed behind. They hurried through an alley to where Roberto's driver waited with the car. As they pulled away, Victoria demanded answers. What's happening? Why are we running? Roberto checked to make sure they weren't being followed before explaining. Carlos was involved with dangerous people, including Antonio Martinez. They think Elisa has evidence that could incriminate them. And do you? Victoria asked her sister. Elisa nodded. Carlos left a flash drive hidden at Vale dos Cedros. It has proof of money laundering, bribery, maybe worse. Victoria paled. Antonio Martinez, the business mogul? He's ruthless, Elisa. His family has connections everywhere. I know, Roberto said grimly. His daughter Diana is my fiancée, or was. Victoria's eyes widened. You were engaged to a Martinez, and now you're helping my sister expose them. Why? Roberto's eyes met Elisa's in the rearview mirror. Because some things are more important than business alliances. Back at the penthouse, Roberto increased security while the sisters continued their reunion. Victoria had 1,000 questions, and Elisa did her best to answer them all. I can't believe you survived alone for so long, Victoria said, her eyes filled with admiration and sorrow. You always were the stronger one. I wasn't strong, Elisa admitted. There were days I wanted to give up, but I kept hoping someone would find me. And someone did, Victoria said, glancing at Roberto, who was on the phone in the next room. He seems to care about you a great deal. Elisa blushed. He saved my life. I owe him everything. It looks like more than gratitude. To me, Victoria observed with a small smile. And from the way he looks at you, the feeling is mutual. Before Elisa could respond, Roberto returned. I've arranged for both of you to stay at a secure location outside the city. My security team will take you there tonight. What about you? Elisa asked, alarmed. I need to stay here and handle things, Roberto explained. Tomorrow we're taking the evidence to the district attorney. Once it's in official hands, the Martinez family won't be able to bury it. I'm not leaving. You, Elisa said firmly. We're in this together. Victoria watched their exchange with growing understanding. Elisa's right, she added. Separating makes you both more vulnerable. Roberto was about to argue when his phone rang. It was Diana. You need to listen to me, she said without preamble. My father has sent men to find you and Elisa. These aren't businessmen, Roberto, they're killers. Why are you warning me? He asked, suspicious. There was a pause. Because despite everything, I don't want to see you hurt. I'm trying to buy you time, but you need to disappear. Both of you. Why should I believe you? Because I found out what my father did, Diana said, her voice breaking. He was involved in Carlos Montero's death, and he won't hesitate to do the same to you and Elisa if you threaten him. After ending the call, Roberto shared Diana's warning with Elisa and Victoria. It could be a trap, Victoria said cautiously. Maybe, Roberto agreed, but we can't take that chance. We need to leave now. They quickly packed essentials. Roberto transferred the contents of the flash drive to a secure server and gave each of them access codes. Insurance, he explained. Now the information doesn't depend on any one of us. As they prepared to leave, the building's security system alerted them to an unauthorized entry. The security cameras showed 3 men entering the lobby, overpowering the doorman. They found us, Roberto said, pulling Elisa and Victoria toward the emergency stairs. We'll go down to the parking garage. There's another exit there. They hurried down the stairs, Roberto leading the way. In the parking garage, they headed for Roberto's second car, a less conspicuous sedan he kept for emergencies. They were almost there when a shot rang out, the bullet hitting a concrete pillar, inches from Roberto's head. Behind them stood 2 men, guns raised. Mr. Santoro, one of them called out. We just want to talk. Get to the car, Roberto whispered to Elisa and Victoria. I'll distract them. No. Elisa grabbed his arm. We stay together. Before Roberto could argue, the garage's sprinkler system suddenly activated, drenching everything. The emergency alarm blared, and moments later, police sirens could be heard approaching. Through the artificial rain, they saw the gunman, retreating, unwilling to risk a confrontation with police. Someone triggered the fire alarm, Victoria said, looking around in confusion. As they hurried to the car, Roberto spotted Diana standing by the garage entrance, her hand on the alarm. Their eyes met briefly before she turned and disappeared. They drove through the night, keeping to back roads. Roberto had a cabin in the mountains, isolated and secure. By dawn, they arrived, exhausted but safe. We'll stay here until tomorrow, Roberto said as they entered the rustic but comfortable space. Then we take the evidence to the authorities. While Victoria rested in one of the bedrooms, Roberto and Elisa sat on the cabin's porch watching the sunrise over the mountains. I'm sorry for bringing this danger into your life, Elisa said softly. Roberto took her hand. You have nothing to apologize for. If anything, you've opened my eyes to what really matters. What does matter? She asked, looking up at him. Not money, not status, not business deals. His eyes held hers. What matters is having something worth fighting for, someone worth protecting. Slowly, inevitably, they leaned toward each other. This time, there was no interruption. Their lips met in a gentle kiss that deepened as years of loneliness melted away for both of them. When they finally parted, Elisa rested her head on Roberto's shoulder. What happens after tomorrow? If we succeed, then you're free, Roberto said simply. free to reclaim your life, your identity. And us? What happens to us? Roberto lifted her chin gently. That depends on you. I know your feelings for me might be tangled up with gratitude. Elisa placed a finger on his lips. Don't. What I feel for you is real. You didn't just save me from that mansion, Roberto. You showed me that I'm more than a victim, that I have strength I never knew. Their second kiss was interrupted by the sound of a car approaching. Roberto immediately tensed, pulling Elisa inside the cabin. Stay with Victoria, he instructed, reaching for the gun he kept hidden in a drawer. Lock the bedroom door and don't open it for anyone but me. Roberto positioned himself near a window, watching as a single car parked in front of the cabin. To his surprise, Diana stepped out alone. Cautiously, he opened the door, keeping the gun at his side. How did you find us? Diana raised her hands to show she was unarmed. I put a tracker on your car weeks ago. I was jealous. Wanted to know where you were going all the time. Why are you here? To warn you. My father knows you have evidence against him. He's desperate, Roberto. He's coming for you, and he's bringing men who won't leave witnesses. Roberto studied her face, looking for deceit. Why should I believe you're not leading them to us? Diana's eyes filled with tears. Because I saw what they did to Carlos Montero. I saw the photos, the reports my father kept. He had him killed, Roberto. And when I realized you were next, she shook her head. I couldn't be part of that. From inside the bedroom, Elisa had been listening. She opened the door, ignoring Roberto's protestations, and faced Diana directly. If you're telling the truth, then help us, Elisa challenged. Help us get this evidence to the authorities. Diana hesitated, then nodded. There's a district attorney, Garcia. He's been trying to build a case against my father for years. He's the only one in the DA's office we can trust. I know Garcia, Roberto said, still wary. But how do we reach him without leading Antonio's men to us? I can arrange a meeting, Diana offered. Tonight. My father thinks I'm at the spa. He won't suspect I'm involved. While Diana made calls, Roberto and Elisa discussed their options with Victoria. Can we trust her? Victoria asked skeptically. I don't know, Roberto admitted, but we're running out of time and options. I believe her, Elisa said, surprising them both. I saw her face when she realized what her father had done. That wasn't an act. By evening, Diana had arranged for District Attorney Garcia to meet them at a safe house outside the city. They would travel separately, Diana with Victoria, Roberto with Elisa, to minimize risk. As they prepared to leave, Roberto pulled Elisa aside. If anything goes wrong, promise me you'll put yourself first. Get away, get safe. Elisa framed his face with her hands. Nothing is going to go wrong. Tomorrow, this will all be over, and we can start thinking about the future. Our future. Their drive to the meeting point was tense but uneventful. The safe house was a small, unremarkable building with a security system that Roberto personally verified before allowing anyone inside. District Attorney Garcia arrived exactly on time. A serious man with gray hair and tired eyes that had seen too much corruption. Ms. Martinez has given me a general overview, he said after introductions, but I need to see the evidence myself before I can act. Roberto connected his laptop to a secure server and displayed the contents of the flash drive. Garcia's expression grew increasingly grave as he reviewed financial records, photographs and transcripts that implicated not just Antonio Martinez, but several other prominent figures in a web of corruption. This is extraordinary, Garcia said finally. With this evidence, we can bring charges against at least a dozen individuals. But I must warn you, these are powerful people. Even with this evidence, they have resources, connections. We understand the risks, Roberto said, squeezing Elisa's hand. But Elisa deserves justice, and these men need to be stopped. Garcia nodded. I'll need your formal statements tonight. Tomorrow morning, I'll have arrest warrants issued and protective custody arranged for all of you. As they began the process of giving statements, a security alarm suddenly blared. On the monitors, they could see several vehicles approaching, men with guns already deployed around the perimeter. It's a trap, Roberto shouted, pulling Elisa toward the back exit. Diana looked genuinely shocked. "I didn't tell anyone, I swear." Garcia was already on his phone calling for backup. "Police are on their way, but they're at least 15 minutes out. We need to hold them off." Outside, a voice called through a megaphone. "Roberto Santoro, send out Elisa Montero and the flash drive, and the rest of you can walk away." Roberto recognized the voice, and it was Vega, one of the men who had posed as detectives. "They must have followed one of us," Victoria said, her voice shaking. Diana's face had gone pale. "No," she whispered. "They followed me. My father must have had me tracked too." Garcia distributed the few weapons they had among them. "We need to buy time until backup arrives." The first shots came through the windows, sending glass shattering across the room. Everyone dropped to the floor. "The safe room," Roberto shouted over the noise. "In the basement. It's reinforced steel. We can hold out there." They crawled toward the basement door, bullets continuing to fly overhead. Garcia was hit in the shoulder, but insisted they keep moving. In the basement, they barricaded themselves in the small safe room. Roberto had installed it months ago, never imagining he would actually need it. "I'm so sorry," Diana sobbed. "This is all my fault." "It doesn't matter now," Elisa said firmly. "What matters is surviving until help comes." Above them, they could hear the intruders searching the house. It would only be a matter of time before they found the basement entrance. Roberto checked his watch. "Police should be here in 10 minutes. We just need to hold out." The sound of footsteps on the basement stairs sent a chill through everyone. They had been found. "Roberto Santoro," Vega called through the safe room door. "We know you're in there. Come out now, or we'll use explosives to open this door. You have 1 minute to decide." Roberto looked at Elisa, his eyes filled with determination and love. "We've come too far to give up now." Elisa squeezed his hand. "Together. Whatever happens, we face it together." As Vega began his countdown, they braced themselves for whatever would come next. The future they had just begun to imagine hung in the balance, threatened by the ghosts of the past that refused to stay buried. Outside, the wail of approaching sirens pierced the night air. Help was coming, but would it arrive in time? In that moment of uncertainty, Roberto and Elisa held onto each other and the hope that their story was far from over. 10 seconds left," Vega shouted through the safe room door. The countdown had everyone on edge, their hearts pounding with each number. Inside the reinforced room, Roberto looked at the faces around him. Elisa, clutching his hand tightly. Victoria, her eyes wide with fear. Diana, tears streaming down her face. And District Attorney Garcia, pressing a cloth to his bleeding shoulder. 5 seconds. The police are coming, Roberto reminded them. We just need to hold out a little longer. 3, 2. Suddenly, the sound of gunfire erupted above them, but it wasn't directed at the safe room door. Shouts and heavy footsteps thundered through the house. "Police, drop your weapons." Relief washed over everyone as they realized help had arrived just in time. The next few minutes were chaotic. More gunfire, shouted commands, the thud of bodies hitting the floor. Then a voice called down to them. "This is Captain Mendez, State Police. Is anyone down there?" "Yes," Roberto shouted back. "District Attorney, Garcia is wounded. We need medical assistance." When they finally emerged from the safe room, they found the house swarming with police officers. Vega and his men were in handcuffs, being led away. Captain Mendez, a stern-faced woman with short, gray hair, approached them. "We got here as fast as we could," she said. "DA Garcia's emergency call triggered a special response team. You're lucky we were conducting exercises nearby." As paramedics treated Garcia's wound, Roberto introduced everyone. "This is Elisa Montero," he said, his arm protectively around Elisa's shoulders. "She was declared dead 3 years ago as part of a cover-up orchestrated by Antonio Martinez." Captain Mendez's eyebrows rose. "Antonio Martinez? The businessman?" "The criminal," Garcia corrected from the stretcher. "And we have the evidence to prove it. Check my laptop. It's all there." Diana stepped forward, her voice steady despite her tear-stained face. "I can testify against my father. I've witnessed his illegal activities firsthand." "Ms. Martinez," Captain Mendez said with surprise, "your cooperation will be noted." As Garcia was loaded into an ambulance, he called Roberto over. "This isn't over yet," he warned. "Antonio Martinez is still free and he has friends in high places. You all need protection until we can make arrests." Roberto nodded. "We'll be careful." The police took them to a secure hotel where they would stay under guard until the next morning. Roberto and Elisa shared a quiet moment alone on the balcony of their room, the city lights twinkling below them. "I still can't believe we made it." "Hout," Elisa said, shivering slightly despite the warm night air. Roberto wrapped his arms around her. "Hey, it's almost over. Tomorrow Garcia will issue the arrest warrants and Antonio Martinez will finally face justice." Elisa turned in his embrace to look up at him. "And then what? What happens to us when this is all over?" "That's up to you," Roberto said softly. "But I know what I want. Tell me." "I want to wake up beside you every morning. I want to restore Vale dos Cedros together and make it a home filled with love instead of fear. I want to build a future where you never have to be afraid again." Tears filled Elisa's eyes. "That's what I want too." Their kiss was gentle, but filled with promise. For the first time, they allowed themselves to believe that happiness might truly be within reach. Inside, Victoria and Diana sat across from each other, an awkward silence between them. "Thank you," Victoria finally said, "for helping us. It couldn't have been easy to turn against your father." Diana looked down at her hands. "I spent my whole life trying to please him, never questioning his methods. When I realized what he had done to your sister and to Carlos," she shook her head, "I couldn't be part of it anymore. What will you do after this?" Diana gave a sad smile. "I don't know. My whole identity has been as Antonio Martinez's daughter, the future of his empire. Without that, I'm not sure who I am." "You're someone who chose to do the right thing even when it was difficult," Victoria said kindly. "That's a good place to start." The next morning brought news that warrants had been issued for Antonio Martinez and several of his associates. Captain Mendez arrived to escort them to the courthouse, where they would make their formal statements. As they prepared to leave, Roberto's phone rang. It was Marcus. "Sir, there's something you should know," his assistant said urgently. "Antonio Martinez was at the office this morning. He was looking for you." Roberto felt a chill run down his spine. "Did he say anything?" "Just that he wanted to speak with you personally." "Sir, he didn't seem like a man who was worried about arrest warrants. He seemed confident." After sharing this news with the others, Roberto pulled Captain Mendez aside. "I'm concerned Martinez might have something planned. He's not the type to go down without a fight." "We have officers at his home and office," Captain Mendez assured him. "He can't hide for long." The courthouse was surrounded by reporters when they arrived. News of Antonio Martinez's imminent arrest had leaked, creating a media frenzy. Roberto shielded Elisa as they pushed through the crowd, cameras flashing in their faces. Inside, they were escorted to a conference room where more police officers waited along with DA Garcia, his arm in a sling but his determination undiminished. "We'll take your statements separately," he explained. "Diana will go first since her testimony is crucial to establishing Antonio's direct involvement." As Diana was led away, Roberto noticed a man in a security uniform he didn't recognize. Something about the way he stood, his alertness, seemed off. "Captain," Roberto said quietly. "Who is that guard?" Captain Mendez followed his gaze. "He's not one of ours." Before anyone could react, the man pulled a gun. "Nobody move," he shouted. Everything happened in a blur. Police officers drew their weapons, civilians ducked for cover. In the chaos, the fake guard grabbed Diana, using her as a shield. "Drop your weapons or she dies," he demanded, backing toward a side door. Roberto saw Diana's terrified eyes, the gun pressed to her temple. Despite everything, she was still helping them, still trying to do the right thing. The officers had no choice but to lower their weapons. The man continued backing away, dragging Diana with him. "This is a message from Antonio Martinez," the gunman announced. "No one betrays him, not even his daughter." In that moment, Diana's eyes met Roberto's. There was a sad acceptance in them, as if she had always known it would end this way, but Roberto refused to accept it. As the gunman reached the door, Roberto lunged forward, tackling them both. The gun went off, the sound deafening in the enclosed space. Roberto felt a searing pain in his shoulder but managed to knock the weapon away. Police officers swarmed in, subduing the gunman. "Roberto!" Elisa cried, rushing to his side. "You're bleeding." "It's just a graze," he assured her, though the pain suggested otherwise. "Diana." Diana sat on the floor, shaking but unharmed. "You saved me," she said in disbelief. "Why?" "Because no one deserves to be a victim," Roberto said, wincing as paramedics examined his wound. "Not even Antonio Martinez's daughter." The incident only strengthened the case against Antonio. The fake guard quickly confessed that Antonio had hired him to kill Diana for her betrayal. Within hours, Antonio Martinez was arrested at a private airfield, attempting to flee the country. 2 months later, Elisa stood on the porch of Vale dos Cedros, watching as workers restored the mansion's facade. The house that had been her prison was being transformed into something beautiful, something meaningful. Roberto joined her, his arm still in a sling but healing well. "What do you think? The architects have done wonders with the East Wing." Elisa smiled, leaning against him. "It's beautiful. I never thought I could love this place, but seeing it come back to life, it's like watching my own journey." The past months had been a whirlwind. Antonio Martinez and his associates had been charged with multiple crimes, including the murder of Carlos Montero. Diana had entered witness protection after testifying against her father. The evidence from the flash drive had exposed corruption that reached into city government, leading to numerous arrests and resignations. Most importantly for Elisa, her legal status had been restored. She was officially alive again, with all the rights and opportunities that entailed. "Victoria called this morning," Elisa said. "She's coming to visit next weekend. She's excited to see the progress on the house." Roberto smiled. "She should be. The Victoria wing will be the most beautiful part of the restoration. They had decided to transform Vale dos Cedros into a shelter for survivors of domestic abuse, a place where those who had been forgotten could find safety and rebuild their lives. Each section of the mansion would be named after someone who had helped bring Elisa back from the darkness. Victoria, Garcia, even Diana. "Have you heard anything about Diana?" Elisa asked. Roberto shook his head. "Not since the trial. According to Garcia, she started a new life somewhere far away. I hope she finds peace." They walked through the gardens, which were beginning to bloom again after years of neglect. The symbolism wasn't lost on either of them. "I received an offer for the company today," Roberto said casually. "A good one." Elisa looked at him in surprise. "Are you considering it?" "Yes," he admitted. "Santoro Developments has been my life for so long. But now I want something different, something more meaningful. The shelter? That's part of it." He stopped walking, turning to face her. "But mostly I want more time to enjoy life, to help others, to be with the people I love." His eyes held, hers filled with tenderness. "To be with you, Elisa, if that's what you want too." Elisa's heart swelled with emotion. The journey from that dark, dusty room where Roberto had found her to this moment had been long and perilous. There had been times when she thought she would never be free, never be whole again. "There's something I want to show you," Roberto said, leading her toward a part of the garden they hadn't visited before. As they rounded a corner, Elisa gasped. Before them stood a small, perfect cottage, nestled among the trees. "What is this?" she asked, stepping closer. "It's for us," Roberto explained. "I thought you might not want to live in the main house with all its memories. This cottage will be our home if you want it, a place that has no history except the one we create." Tears filled Elisa's eyes as she explored the cottage. It was everything she had dreamed of during those dark years, warm, cozy, filled with light. A home, not a prison. "It's perfect," she whispered. On the cottage's small porch, Roberto took both her hands in his. "Elisa Montero, when I found you in that abandoned mansion, I thought I was saving you. But the truth is, you saved me. You showed me what really matters in life." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. I know it might be too soon, and if it is, I'll wait. I'll wait as long as you need. But I want you to know that I love you and I want to spend the rest of my life with you." He opened the box, revealing a simple but elegant diamond ring. "Will you marry me?" Elisa looked at the ring, then into Roberto's eyes. In them, she saw everything she had ever wanted: love, safety, understanding, and most importantly, freedom. The freedom to choose her own path, to love without fear. "Yes," she said, her voice strong and clear. "Yes, I will marry you." As Roberto slipped the ring onto her finger, Elisa felt the last shadows of her past finally recede. The woman who had been forgotten by the world had not only been found, but had discovered a strength within herself she never knew existed. Roberto pulled her into his arms, sealing their promise with a kiss. Around them, Vale dos Cedros stood as a testament to their journey, a place once defined by darkness now transformed by light and love. That evening, they sat on the cottage porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. Elisa's head rested on Roberto's shoulder, his arm wrapped securely around her. "Do you ever think about how different our lives would be if you hadn't decided to explore the mansion that night?" Elisa asked softly. Roberto smiled. "Sometimes, but I believe we were meant to find each other. Some things are just meant to be." Elisa looked up at the grand silhouette of Vale dos Cedros against the twilight sky. Once her prison, now a symbol of hope for others who had been forgotten, who needed to be found and remembered. "From darkness to light," she murmured. "From forgotten to remembered." Roberto kissed the top of her head. "And you will never be forgotten again. I promise you that." As night fell across Vale dos Cedros, lights began to glow in windows that had been dark for years. Like stars appearing in the night sky, they offered guidance and hope. A reminder that even after the darkest night, dawn always comes. For Elisa and Roberto, that dawn had finally arrived. Their story, which had begun in shadow and fear, would continue in light and love. The woman who had been forgotten had found not only her freedom but her future, and what a beautiful future it would be. The end.